Hello, folks. Welcome to Kudlow. I'm Larry Kudlow. So never let a good crisis go to waste. Now, you probably thought that was coined by President Obama's chief of staff years ago, Rahm Emanuel, but actually it was first uttered by Winston Churchill. Now, Churchill was referring to originating the UN, which at the time seemed like a good idea. Perhaps not so much anymore. Emanuel was referring to a left-wing big government agenda, which was a bad idea at the time and continues to be a bad idea today. Now, in the midst of this energy crisis, with skyrocketing oil and gasoline prices and just about every other energy price, Joe Biden has decided to choose a radical climate agenda rather than national energy security. Now, listen to this. President Biden said yesterday, and I'm going to quote, "My dear mother used to have an expression. Inside everything lousy, something good will happen if you look hard enough," end quote. We have a chance to make a fundamental turn toward renewable energy, electric vehicles, across the board. That was the end of his quote, not his mother's quote. Now, this sentiment has been echoed by several others in his administration. We have an inflation crisis. We have a recession crisis. We're also financing Russia's war machine, but the Bidens are still determined to implement a crazy Green New Deal strategy that, frankly, will never happen. And while Americans are suffering enormous economic and financial pain, with more to come, the Bidens are still clinging to an ideological obsession. I just wonder if you find this as incredible as I do, because they will do anything not to turn on the fossil fuel spigots. They're already blowing up our strategic petroleum reserve, which is a national security measure, not a political price-fixing one. They've even flirted with some kind of debit card gas payment scheme. And now the latest is a temporary suspension of the 18.4 cents federal gasoline tax, which, of course, is nothing but a gimmick. Even Barack Obama labeled it a gimmick during his term, and would be set to expire, by the way, after the midterm elections for vote-buying purposes. You know that. But even worse, there's a strong chance that if they push this idea through, it will be coupled with an excess profits tax on oil companies, shades of Jimmy Carter. Now remember, the federal gas tax funds the Highway Trust Fund, which is already near bankruptcy. So if they suspend the federal gas tax, they'll defund roads and highways and undermine their precious infrastructure legislation, which wasn't all that great to begin with. An excess profits tax would be very bad news. You'll get less oil and gas production, much less. Senator Ron Wyden wants 21%. Now, that would be on top of the existing 21% corporate tax, which would make a 42% marginal tax rate on fossil companies. So, as Art Laffer always reminds us, if you tax something, you'll get less of it. But then again, isn't that exactly what these radical climate people want? Less oil and gas? They don't care about high prices. They don't care about middle-class hardships. They don't care about truckers who can't afford to fill her up. They care about electric vehicles and battery chargers. Even though, by the way, the manufacturing of electric vehicles and battery chargers would require substantial mining and processing that itself would release plenty of carbon emissions into the air. That's one of the things that's so absurd about this whole Biden climate story. In fact, the construction of wind and solar farms will release plenty of carbons into the air. But I digress for a moment. Never let a crisis go to waste. An excess profits tax is, in fact, big government socialism. And there may be more. The president has threatened to use the Defense Production Act to somehow force more oil refining or limit exports. More big government socialism, isn't that? The president is working with Joe Manchin and Chuck Schumer for at least $500 billion in renewable tax credits and probably other forms of spending from this Build Back Smaller playbook. That would be coupled with a massive tax increase, perhaps over $1 trillion. And that would surely slam the economy into a very deep recession. A bill like that would, in some sense, be a perfect couple with the $2 trillion spending bill of almost 18 months ago. Democrats would have a perfect record. They cast the votes for inflation then. Now they can cast the votes for deep recession. kind of a tragedy, don't you think? Since they were handed a fundamentally strong economy from Mr. Trump with high growth and low inflation. They were handed that by Mr. Trump. That's what's so tragic about this. Look, the last thing I want to do is insult Joe Biden's dear mother, believe me. But I think other dear mothers might just say, Joe, where's your common sense? Some dear mothers out on the Western Range might even say, Joe, don't you have any horse sense? And I'll just say, apparently not. And that's my riff. We'll leave it there.